Sandra of Nomad Stitches, and this is the video for the Pescador Beanie. Now this is the adult medium, so this one I've made for myself, and this pattern is worked vertically, so it's worked in this direction all the way around, and once the body is finished it's joined on the side. Let me find the joint, there it is. So it's joined on the side on the inside, and the crown is worked at the end. Now the shaping comes from short rows and it's worked in sort of segments. So that's how the pattern is arranged, in segments. So depending on your side, each segment is going to have a different amount of rows. So for example, this adult medium, it's easier to see on this side. So you can see this is the first row of the segment, then you have another ridge here, one more, and then the next segment starts. So there are 6 segments to each beanie, and some sizes the segments are different amount of rows, and the adult medium, they're all the same number of rows, but in others it differs, so you do need to look at the pattern. So today I'm going to show you how to do these segments and how to do the shaping, and then you just repeat that around and join it at the end. So this video is going to be very helpful for how to complete the beanie. Alright, so let's get started. I am using Serdar Country Classic. It's a worsted yarn. It's very, very nice. It's 100% wool, I believe. Oh no, 50% wool and 50% acrylic, so it's super wash. It's very easy to clean, very warm, super comfy. And I'm using a 6mm hook, so I'm going to put links in the description for all of the yarn and my favorite crochet hooks. Alright, so this is how you start the beanie. You start with a chain, and then you have to count from this end down. So for the toddler size, I counted 12, and then I've put my marker on the 13th stitch. So this is going to be my top end, and this is going to be my brim end, the bottom of my beanie. Now this length is as long as the beanie will be from the tip to the end. So you can easily adjust the length of this chain to fit whatever needs that you want. So the numbers I give you in the pattern are just approximates to give you an idea of the size that I want to achieve. But if you wanted a different size, feel free to adjust the length of this chain. Now we're going to start with this first segment, the first row, and it's a up row. It means that it goes up, so in the direction of the crown. So the first row says chain 1, then double slip stitch until 2 stitches from the end of the round. Now if you don't know how to make double slip stitch, I'm going to link a video up here for you to know how to make double slip stitch and all the ins and outs of that stitch. So you basically yarn over, then insert the hook into the stitch, yarn over again, and then pull through the stitch, and this same loop you pull through the 2 loops on the hook. Okay, so it's like a slip stitch but with a yarn over in the middle. So insert, pull through, and then pull through the 2 loops on your hook. A good trick for how to work this stitch is to hold on to the middle loop while you are passing that other loop through, and that makes it a lot easier to work. It takes some getting used to, I'm not gonna lie, but once you get used to it, it feels very, very easy and uncomplicated. Alright, I have reached my marker. Now to pass my marker, the easiest way to do it is to simply put my marker yarn over my working yarn before I work my stitch. So then when I work the stitch, it's going to stay there to mark that new stitch. And then I continue. Alright, so I've worked double slip stitches all the way until 2 stitches from the end. Now this marker is here to tell us the stitch count from the marker to the top end. Remember I told you that you can adjust this chain, as long as you wanted. So it would be impossible for me to know how many stitches you have total. However, I can tell you how many stitches there are from the marker to the top. So at this point there are 10 stitches from the marker, between the marker and the top end of the row. Now row 2 goes down. So what we're going to do is chain 1. Then you're going to skip the first stitch and you're going to work in the next stitch. Double slip stitch on the back loop only. So that back loop only is what gives it that ribbing look, and it looks almost like as if it was knitted. Sorry, there's a hair. Okay, and then I have skipped the first stitch, so I decreased 1 stitch, and I am going to work until the end of the row. And while I work, let me remind you to subscribe to my channel, like this video and comment away, and also find me on Instagram and sign up to my newsletter for future releases and overall pattern news. Okay, so I've worked double slip stitch on the back loop only until 2 stitches from the end of the row, which means that I have 7 stitches after my marker. Now I'm going to turn and skip the first stitch and work until the end of the row. So I chain 1, then turn, skip my first stitch and work a double slip stitch on the back loop only on every stitch till the end of the row. Okay, I am at the end of my row again. Now I have 6 stitches after my marker, and I'm going to repeat the last 2 rows again until I have 3 stitches after my marker. And that is going to basically complete one segment, and then I'm going to close the segment off. So I'll be right back until I'm back at the bottom with 3 stitches after my marker. Okay? Alright, so I have finished my last row of my repeat section, and I have 3 stitches at the end of my row after my marker, and I have completed 2, 4, 6 rows so far. So my next up row and my next down row are going to close off the segment and go over these steps of the short rows. So I'm going to work all the way to the end of my row, and then I'm going to show you how I work the steps at the end of the row. Okay? Okay, so I've worked all the way to the marker. Now I'm going to work on these stitches at the end of the row. Then I'm going to work 1 on the step, then 1 on each of these stitches that are empty, then 1 on the next step, then 1 of these 2 stitches, 1 on the step, and then 1 on these 2 chains at the end. And at the end I should have 12 stitches like at the beginning. So 1, 2, and 3, and then I work on the side of that short row. So for that, I like to find that little loop in there and then another little loop. So I have 2 strands of yarn in my hook. That avoids any gaps or any holes. So 4, and then I go to the next 2 empty stitches. 5 and 6. Oopsie. And then I'm back on that step again. So I work another double slip stitch in there. So 1 and 2 strands, pull through. And then on the next one, so I lost count. 7, 8, and 9. And then the last step. That's done. And then the last 2 on that chain. 1 and 2 is 12. There you go. So this is the up row, and then I'm going to chain 1 and turn, and on my down row I will simply work all the way to the end of the row. So I'm going to work that out and show you the first segment completed. Alright, so this is the end of the first segment. It's easy to count the rows by looking at the ridges. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 ridges, which means that I have 8 rows completed. Now, depending on the side, the segments will either be exactly like this one, or might have 2 extra rows or 2 less rows. So 1 more ridge or 1 less ridge than this one. For the toddler, the next segment is going to be exactly like this one, and then the one after that is going to have 2 more rows. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the 5th ridge, which is rows 9 and 10, are going to be the closing rows. So remember here I ended up with 3 stitches. On that segment I'm going to end up with 0 stitches. So I will just continue to repeat those rows 3 and 4 until I have the right amount of rows and the right amount of stitches after my marker. So I'm going to work the next few segments to show you how it looks after 3 segments and then after all 6 segments, and then we're going to close it off. Alright, so I'll be back in a bit. Alright, so I'm about to close the second segment. As you can see, I have 3 stitches at this end, so it's the same as the first segment. And you can see over here how this row is longer. This is the closing of the first segment. Now, remember that on the first segment, the very first row was worked on the chain, which means that that row was worked with double slip stitches. However, from then on, all the double slip stitches have been on the back loop only. So even on row 1 of the second segment, that needs to be on the back loop only, alright? Don't forget. So I'm going to close it off with you. Again, at the end of closing this segment, I want to have 12 stitches. And I want to work on the side of those steps by grabbing at least 2 strands of yarn. Alright, so I work in the 2 empty stitches and I work on the step. Empty stitch, oopsie, empty stitch, and then step. And then the last 2 empty stitches. On the first segment, the last 2 empty stitches were from a chain, but in this case, they are from the last row of the first segment. Okay, and then I'm going to turn and go back to the end. And I'll be back at the end of the next segment to show you how to close that one off. Alright, so this is what it looks like at the end of my third segment. If we count the rows, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 in my first one, then 1, 2, 3, 4 on my second one, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one is going to be the 5th. to close that third segment. Again, because I'm making the toddler size, that's how the counts work. If you're making the baby size, then you'll have 4, 4, and 3. If you're making the adult size, it's going to look different for every size. So now that I'm here, I have an extra step than before, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to work on the side of the step, and then on the 2 empty stitches. Side of the step, 2 empty stitches, side of the step, 2 empty stitches, side of the step, and 2 empty stitches. And that's how I finish my third segment. So I'm gonna do that now. Alright, so that is the end of my third segment. I am back at the crown, and you can see how it's so much narrower at the end, at the top end, than the bottom end, right? And that's going to continue with the next three segments. So I'm going to work, go down to finish my third segment, and then do the other 3, which is a copy of these 3. Again, depending on the size, you have to follow the instructions that the pattern includes, alright? So depending on the size is the number of rows per segment. Alright, so I'll be back after I finish my next 3 segments, and I'll show you how to close it off. Alright, so I have finished the last segment, and you can see here how the segments are divided. So it's easier to see on this side. So here, this is the end of the first one. Then over here, this is the end of the second one, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So you can see, if you look really closely, that this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, and this one has 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. But it's not really that obvious that the segments are different sizes, so that works pretty well. Now I'm going to take the marker off, and to close it, you have to choose which side you like better for your right side. If this is your right side, then you fold this in. Or if this is your right side, then you fold this in. I like this one better. I don't know, I think I like the way this these ridges look a little bit better, but really they look so similar, so it doesn't really matter. And then once you're here, you're going to join the starting chain to the back loop of the last row. So I'm going to insert my hook in the chain. I chain 1 first to allow for the extra length, and then I make a slip stitch. And I tighten it a little bit so it's not so big and bulky. And then I do the next stitch. Again, I want to go on the back loop of that one, right? So you want to use the outside loop of the stitch. If you are doing it the other way around, you're going to do the front loop, because it's it would be like this. So you want to use the front loop, right? So you want to use the outer loop, either the front one or the back one, depending on which side you are working on. And then continue doing slip stitches all the way to the end, joining the starting chain to the back, to the last row of the beanie. Alright, so I have finished joining one end. If you don't want to do it with slip stitches, you can always do it with a tapestry needle, and cut the yarn at the end and use the tapestry needle to work all the way to the top. So now that you're at the top, you're going to cut this yarn, and you want to leave a little bit of a tail, because you have that gap up here as well, and we need to close that. So you're going to put your tail inside through your needle, and you're going to weave it through. I like to do this on the right side because last time I did this on the wrong side, I missed some of these threads. And if you miss them, they look a bit just not so neat. And I like my crown to be super neat. Alright, so I'm going to put that over there so it's out of the way. And then you just want to weave it in through that row that closed each segment. You don't need to worry about it being perfect, but you do want it to look as even as possible. And then once you've gone around, you just pull to tighten and then pass it through so that you can fasten off on the inside. And you want to close it off well. Again, it's on the wrong side, so it doesn't really matter if it's like a little bit messy. And then this guy, we're gonna weave it back in so that it's out of the way. And on the inside, I'm going to weave in my ends. And there you go. That's the crown. And that's the hat. So this is a toddler hat. And this is my medium. Oopsie, my phone there the whole time. So this is the adult medium, and this little guy is the toddler hat. And they look super cute. This ribbing is not super stretchy, but is stretchy enough to allow for some movement in the head, but it won't fall off either, right? Because it's quite sturdy. Alright, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that you are following the pattern along. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, sandra@nomadstitches.com, or you can write in the comments here or follow me on Instagram and ask me questions there as well. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I see you next time. Bye-bye.